Hello, everyone, and welcome. I have a frog in my throat, apparently. Today, we're going to make a rag doll. Well, basically, we're going to make a rag doll pattern today. This is part one in a series. So, all we're going to do today is draw a pattern up, and I'm going to explain seam allowance, and I'm not sharing my pattern because I want your dolls to be personal to you. Hi, Pam. So I'm just going to go and grab some sheets of printer paper real quick. About 3 or 4 sheets. So probably I do the whole doll for us. All right, so you'll need paper and a pencil. This is just an example of what I'm going to use for my doll's hair. This is my serger's offcuts. Hi Leah, you can use if you do sewing, you can use the serger offcuts. If you don't sew and you don't have this, you can cut strips of fabric either with plain scissors, or if you want to add a little kink to her hair, you could cut strips of fabric real thin, like 1/4-inch strips, with a pair of pinking shears. You could use yarn or twine or anything like that, but that's just something to think about. As I said, we're just going to draw this pattern today and cut out the components. And then next week, I will we'll go from there. But this is part one. Let's draw the pattern. And I'm going to make my doll out of just plain muslin. You know, the stuff that comes out of bolt muslin. But if you don't have muslin, don't worry about it. If you've got an old pillowcase or you've got just some kind of fleshy colored fabric, or if you want to make a colorful doll, you can just make a real colorful doll and just have her made out of whatever fabric you have. She doesn't have to be just a solid color. She could be some fabric that you've created your own art on. Hi, Gail. So get your mind going of what kind of fabric you want to use. And for right now, we're just going to kind of draw this pattern up. And what I'm going to do is for like her head or whatever, that'll be where we start. I'm going to kind of cheat. And I don't want a really huge doll, but I want my doll. Let's talk about. That's something you're going to have to think about. How tall do you want your doll? If you take a measuring tape and you think, do you want a tiny doll, like 8 to 10 inches? Do you want her to be able to sit in a chair? Maybe a 20-inch doll would be cute. And then you have to think about how you're going to divide that. Do you want her legs to be the longest portion of her body? Or do you want her to have a long body with short legs? This is your doll. And people come in every shape and size. And I know that my youngest sister's got really long legs and a real short torso. She's 5'10". You know, not everybody is going to have that golden rule ratio. None of us actually fit in that ratio when it comes to our physique and our, the size we are. So I'm going to make my doll about 20 inches long because I think that'd be nice for her to sit. So if I'm looking at this, so I want her head to be about, maybe my doll's going to have only a 4-inch head or maybe a 5-inch head. That would leave me 15 inches for body and legs. So if I make a 5-inch head, I'm just going to kind of put a ruler down or measuring tape, and I'm just going to kind of put this and this. That'll be my 2-mark guideline. Oh, and this thing is driving me bonkers already. Hold, please. I just woke up from a nap, so bear with me for just a minute. Because that going in and out is just too much for me. And I'll come in a little closer so you can see. All right, so maybe that'll be better. So my dolly's going to have a 5-inch head, finished 5-inch. She's going to have a big head. Maybe I think I'll change that and make it down to 4 inches. So then you draw your head shape. So this is her chin, and this is the top of her head where her hair goes. So just whatever shape you draw. Do you want your dolly to be like Betty Boop and real round or squared off? Or do you want her to be like this? And then I'm just going to turn the paper. And if you want ideas for a doll, I would recommend maybe checking out Pinterest. All right, so now when I'm looking at her, this side isn't as rounded out. Another thing you could do is divide her head in half and then just draw half of her head. But I'm not doing that this time. I'm going to do this shape. How am I doing? Now I've gone too far. And just play with the shape until you get one you like. This is the finished size. So this is how big I want it when she's finished. But the problem with that, we're going to make a cloth doll, right? So I'm going to have a nice rounded head. And, you know, if you do the whole, go ahead and you can put some guidelines in. They say, what is it? Half the distance is where the eyes are. If you want to go ahead and put a mark at 2 inches and make a line just on your pattern piece. This is about where her eyes will go, right? I'm just going to put a line there. And then what is it? The half the distance between that and the bottom is the bottom of the nose and then her mouth. So, and I don't know how we're going to do. We might just do button eyes. She's going to be a rag doll, okay? Hi, Nashwa. All right. But this is not what we want to cut out. We want to add our seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance because I want to add the seam allowance out here. Just doing little 1/4 inch marks here. And then you can fill in between them with your own pencil. So what we're doing is we're adding that seam allowance to it. And in doll making, 1/4 is usually the seam allowance. So we're going to go ahead and do this all the way around. If you give yourself too much seam allowance, it's really hard to deal with it when you go to the sewing machine. If you don't have a sewing machine, you can still sew this by hand. It'll just take you longer. You can also take like a child's drawing and kind of turn it into their very own doll. If I had a little one in my life, I would ask them to draw me a dolly, and then I would try very hard to do the doll for them, you know, with their, you know, crooked eyes and everything. So it would look like their picture. I think that would be fun. Maybe one day I'll get a little granddaughter to be able to do that for. Another thing you can do with a child's drawing, I'm just throwing out ideas as I work, is you can take it to like one of the printers and have them blow it up, blow the picture up, and then you can just trace off the different parts of the doll. You know, have them blow it up 150 to 200%, and then create your pattern from that, and just think about breaking the child's picture up into, you know, different pattern pieces, like one for the head and one for the body, the arms, and then you got to think about the clothes. All right, so I've put a 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay. So now before we cut this out, we want to make some little marks, some little guidelines. So if we just put, just like on a dress form, pick a place, okay? I mean on a dress pattern, and do one of the little thingamajigs. You might want to do one there, and you might just want to do one here. This is at about the eye level. So this will be the front and the back of the head. So we'll label this head and cut 2. And then, so these will be, to make sure you're lining them up in the right place. And then down here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a neck, a little neck piece. This part you won't stuff. This will just be the part that you put over the body piece, which we'll get to in just a minute. This is just to give you a little extra fabric here. And this will be where we stuff it. Stuff the head, and you'll stop like right there. And I like to leave this piece of fabric there. You might trim it away. We're just going to have it there as a way to attach the head to the body. Okay, so there's our head piece. So now we need the body part. And again, I want my doll to be 20 inches. So I've used 4 inches. That means I have 16 inches left for body and legs. And I'm going to pull the measuring tape is the easiest way to give yourself a visual. So say that's her head. And we're going to make a piece that'll go up inside this on the body. So we need to add that inch to whatever measurement we have. So let's get down here to the 16 inches, which you can't see what I'm looking at. There's the head. We're going to make like a 1-inch little bump at the top of the body. That's for the neck to get sewn on. Okay. And I want my doll to be a total of 20 inches. So I have 16 left. So I'm going to just pull this down to the bottom of my addition here, where I'm 1 inch here. I'm going to pull this down here just to give myself a visual. So that means there's my 16. If I want her to have nice long legs, half of that would be 8. I'm going to do 7.5 inches for her body. And I'm going to do the same as I did the head. I'm going to do the actual measurement, and then we'll add a seam allowance. All right. So this one I might need. No, I think I can get it all on here. So I want her body to be 7.5. But I also want to add that 1 inch at the top. So I'm going to mark it at 8.5 inches. This is probably clear as mud. All right. And half the width of my paper is 4.25. This is just a guideline I'm putting down here. 4.25. I'm just going to do a little guideline here. A little dashy line down through here. All right, you can kind of see my dash line there. All right, so now that little bump out that I made right here is I didn't put a seam allowance here. All right, and you'll stitch exactly on her head. So when you get done stitching her, what you'll have is something that looks like a big light bulb, okay? So then inside measurement I have here is 1.5 inches. So 1/2 inch is 3/4. So on my dotted line, I'm going to line the dotted line up with 3/4 inch. And then I'll come and what did I say? 1.25 inches, right? Yeah. I'm going to do 3/4 inch on each side of my line. 1, 2, 3. All right, that's going to be my little bump out area. And again, I'm just drawing this. And we want it to be about 1 inch tall. So I'm going to come down here 1 inch from the top. It's here. Oh, nope, that's wrong. I just need a couple marks here. 1 inch from the top of that neck piece. Okay. This will be about where the shoulders are. All right, so I'm going to cut her head out real quick so it's a more visual thing. Hi, Janet. And I'm cutting on the farthest line out so that I'm getting my seam allowance in there. And I didn't want this video to be very long because I want you guys to not have to watch a really long video, to just be able to draw your own basic pattern. And like I said, I'm not furnishing the pattern. I feel like the dolls need to be unique to us as individuals. So there's my dolly's head. And now you'll see what I've got here is this should be about the same width. And I've got it in it too wide. That's why I wanted to cut it out. It's too wide. It basically really needs to just come out and then go straight down to this line. This is basically her neck piece right here, okay? And you can round these corners off if you want to. Remember, we're going to come back and add a seam allowance. So now here's her head. And by doing this, you can see what you're going to end up with is where do you want her shoulders to fall now? If we line up her, get her kind of on here as good as we can centered. And there's my dolly's head. This is coming down to her shoulders. So if we come out from this line and start coming down, you think about where your shoulders hit. Your shoulders come out farther than your ears, right? So I've curved too soon here. You need to come out a ways to be kind of similar to a human body. And we're just doing a rag dolly. She does not have to, I think I'm going to do my trick of doing one side and then fold it in the paper in half. So this will be her bottom. What we're going to do is my doll's going to have her legs attached with buttons. So we're not going to sew the legs into the body. They're going to be, legs and arms will be applied to the outside of the body. So this is like a real rag doll, okay? Hi, Carol. Hi, Kimberly. Hi, Janet Nash. Hi, Sherry Hubbing. So here we go. This is going to be the crotch area, basically. So you make your dolly whatever shape you want. Do you want a big round circly round dolly? Do you want her to be to have like a torso like a human being? That is all up to you. So what I was thinking I would do is I would do this and just kind of make a dolly shape. Does not have to be perfect. If your dolly has wider hips, that's fine. In fact, I think my dolly needs to come out some more like this. Okay, I'll erase this line. Just play with your pattern making. Draw a line. Use a pencil, and that way you can erase it if it's looking a little off to you, okay? So now I've got this torso area, but I want to add that 1/4 inch seam, and I'm only going to do half of this because then I'm going to cut this half out and I'll fold my paper in half and I can finish drawing the other side. You'll see what I mean here in just a sec. So we need to add a 1/4 inch all the way around. You need to decide where you're going to stuff your dolly. It would probably be easiest to stuff her from the bottom, but you have to leave the neck. Nope. Let me think on it before I say any more. This is all going to be sewn closed up here. So it'll just be easy to stuff her from the bottom. So we'll just leave an opening at her bottom to stuff her. If you don't want your doll to be like an actual doll, you can add like cat ears to the top. You can do whatever you want to make this doll your own. You can turn this into a fairy doll. You could turn this into whatever you want. I'm just aiming for a basic rag doll with button eyes, and her legs and her arms are attached with buttons. And then once we get our dolls made, then we'll worry about getting her some clothes. And we'll work on drawing patterns for that. I just wanted to do something different than we've been doing, just to throw a little something different out there. And I'm so enjoying sewing again. And the little John Johns are on their way to their forever home. So again, if you've got little kids in your life, I would encourage you to try to make their drawings come to life. That's a fun thing to do. Especially if you just take their picture to a printer. You know, you're always getting pictures from your grandkids or nieces and nephews. And you just have them blow it up to like 200% or more. And then base your pattern off that by just tracing off sections from the child's drawing. Let them do the work for their dolly. My dolly's going to be kind of broad, but that's okay. Another thing is Once we get this drawn and I cut it out and I put it under the doll's head, if it doesn't look proportionate enough, I can make adjustments because everything's done in pencil. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold my sheet of paper in half. And all I'm going to worry about is just following my cut line, and I'll cut out both sides at the same time. That way you don't have to draw the whole pattern piece. You can draw half of it and have the body done. If you try to do both sides and you want it symmetrical, it's not going to happen. To get them even, you have to just fold it in half and cut them out. And again, it's in pencil. And what you really have to focus on is the fact that it looks like this is going to be huge, but by the time you take in the seam allowance at the 1/4 of an inch, it's not going to be that big. So here's my body. Doesn't look too bad. And then if I put her head on up here, like so, she's coming together. All right. So now if I measure my doll, if I put her neck on like so, and I start just at her head, and I come down to just where the seam line will be, I've used 13 inches. So that means I need to have, to get a 20-inch doll, I need to use, what, 7 more inches for her legs, right? All right. So let's get another piece of paper. And since we only need 7 inches, we can use this offcut piece for her legs. And I'm going to just make legs where you can use them for both the right and the left. By cutting 4 total. So if we do the 7 inches, again, I'm going to make me a little cheaty mark here. So her leg will finish out at 7 inches. All right. But say you want to add a 1/2 inch at the top and 1/2 inch at the bottom. That'll bring you to the 8 inches. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it on here or not, but we'll see. I'm going to raise that a 1/2 inch up and then just mark it 8 inches. So you've gained a 1/2 inch here and there. And what that is for, the additional inch, is to come up onto her hip. So the leg will attach here, and here is where her leg's going to attach, right? So that'll give you an inch to deal with that. So I'm going to, we're going to have just the space we need here to do the seam allowance and all. So how do you want your leg to look like? Now keep in mind, it's going to sew against there. So when you look at it, her legs, you're bigger at your thigh. So come out a ways like this. You also have to think about how big of a button are you going to use here. This is where the button's going to go on her leg. Do you want her to have a little bulged out area for her knee? Or do you want to just do what you can do? Let's go back here. So right now, without a seam, okay, if we did 1/2 of 7, that would be 3.5. But is your thigh the same as long as your calf, or is your thigh longer than your calf? That's what you want to decide for your doll to have. Do you want her to have an equally long thigh and calf, or do you want maybe her thigh to be a little bit longer than her calf? All of this is stuff you have to decide, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm still thinking about how her leg is going to attach to the side. So we're looking at it like this. All right. So her foot needs to go out one way or the other. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in a little bit and then go back out a little bit. And you can see from my drawing, I can tell right now this calf is way too long for me. And I need her foot, make her foot come out. So basically, we're looking at a side view of her leg. And her foot's a little long. So just play around with it. I'll erase all the confusing marks here in just a minute. I just want to encourage you guys to explore and make a rag doll of your own without using anyone's pattern but your own. And don't worry what it looks like. By the time you make the doll and you get her stuffed and you put some clothes on her, she's going to be cute no matter what. All right. Just be as fussy as you want with making your pattern. Just don't stress yourself out about it. All right. So basically, I need her thigh to come down farther, I think. Maybe to there. Oh, that's the line I want to keep. I don't know what my dolly will look like in the end. But that's not too bad of a leg. And I'm not making feet to look exactly like feet either. So her toe sticks out a little bit more than her thigh, because like when you stand up, okay, this is the top of the thigh here, because remember, this is going to be sewn on from the side. Now what you have to do is you have to, before you cut her out, don't cut her out until you add that seam allowance, okay? Absolutely, Kathy Whitney. Holding you both in my heart. All right, so just go around and add your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as you can see, the width of the paper is just about where we need to be. I was working on my May clue for the crochet along that I'm doing. And I woke up and it was 1/4 till noon. So I didn't crochet much, did I? Tippy was no help. So next week, what you'll need is your pattern drawn and cut your dolly out of whatever fabric you have. All right. We're just going to make this up as we go along here. And I will probably embroider her lips and just a little nose. And then I'm thinking my doll's going to have just button eyes. And I'm going to use button joints, you know, put her legs and stuff on with buttons. But we'll talk all about construction of them next week. So next week you will need your pattern drawn and your doll cut out of fabric. And then we'll get together and sew them, okay? I'll have to figure out how to set you guys up or bring a sewing machine over here. Thanks to my dear sweet husband, I could set the Quilter Star sewing machine up because he fixed the part. He made the part that we can no longer buy for that sewing machine. I am so fortunate in that he can make that kind of thing out of just scraps laying around the house. So I was very lucky. So if you look at your doll, and as you're doing this, your original lines that you drew, those are going to be where you sew, right? Because you're a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the fabric. And you will need to have 4 legs cut out. So you can write that on here. This is the legs, and cut 4. So you'll need 4 legs, cut 2 heads, cut 2 bodies, because you need a front and a back, a front and a back, and the doll will need 2 legs. Unless you don't want your doll to have 2 legs, because there are people that are not fortunate enough to have both legs. Sometimes, they're not born with them, and they learned how to get along just fine without them. But some people lose their legs. So it all depends on the story your doll holds. I guess we could call these our own story dolls, because you're going to have to make up the story for your dolly. I'll be interested to see how these all turn out. I'm just going into this little space here and making little marks. That might need to be adjusted a little bit as we go along. All right, so now our arms, if you think about it, how long do you want the arms to be? Do you want my fingers end about halfway to my knee? So we'll just lay our doll out here and measure from her shoulder to about midway down her thigh, and that'll tell me how long I need to make her arms. So you can always cheat and use components that you already have drawn out as reference points, if that makes sense. And again, if you want your doll to be really unique, you could cut her out of painted fabric that you've painted yourself. Just if you're going to paint your own fabric, I would highly recommend you use very little paint. You really don't want a thick coat of paint, because your sewing machine will struggle, and you could break a needle off and either damage your machine or hurt yourself. So I would, if you're going to do painted fabric, it needs to be a real, think about dry brushing on fabric. That's what you need to focus on. Or if you're talented like our Carol, you could embroider your doll. Oh, and I would say if everybody would still hold our Ann in your hearts as well. And Laura's got the COVID. So, and she's been quite sick. So I want you guys to also keep her in your thoughts and prayers. And keep Kathy Whitney's husband in your thoughts today as well. Okay, so let's cut her leg out, because we're ready now to cut the leg out. Just don't forget to add the seam allowance, or you will be in trouble. By including the seam allowance, she looks like she's going to be pretty chunky, but this is the part I'm going to have left. I think it's going to be fun to try to make their clothes as well. And see, Mary put some capitals. Good morning, all, and Becky stopping by to give a idea. Catch replay. Oh, okay. She couldn't stay. Okay. I still haven't cut the sundress out. I got the little John Johns finished, and they're in the mail. I tucked in another project I had made that I felt like would be appreciated. All right, so now you can, like, let's lay her out and see how we're doing here. So if we put her head on here, we're doing pretty good. And then this will be her leg. And remember, it's going to go on the side like this, because where the button is, that'll go where this X is. So let's see if I can move her up. We need some arms now. I feel like I'm putting out the operation game here. Let's stick her leg on here. So that's going to be her leg. Her body looks awful wide, but you know what? I'm going to leave her just as she is. And we're going to go with she's adorable, and that's it. When we attach her leg here, I'll show you how to give her a knee in the middle. And so let's see. If I line my X's up about where the legs are going to be attached, and I go from her shoulder, which remember, I need to come in 1/4 of an inch. I didn't draw that all the way around, but about 1/4 of an inch in, and then halfway down her arm, down her thigh. Her arms need to be about 8.5 inches long. So about the same length as her leg, I'm going to make her arm, but I'm not going to make myself struggle as badly as I did that last time. And we're going to do this here. All right. So I think I'm going to make her arms 8 inches long. I think 8 inches would be plenty long enough for her arms. So this will be the top of her arm. And this will be the bottom where her fingers are. So I'm going to start at the top. I could just use her leg. Let's just use her leg pattern. You might as well use what you already have, right? Save yourself. Make this about the same size at the top, and then we'll change it a little bit for the arm. So we're just going to cheat there. So this is the top of the arm. And this is including the seam allowance. So I'm going to come in 1/4 of an inch, just so I have that reference. And then I'll just go back to drawing the rest of the arm, and then I'll do the seam allowance back in the other direction. All right. So now I'm going to do the arm. Now, do you want your doll's arms to be straight? I'm just using copy paper off from my printer. It's nothing fancy. It's just printer paper. Do you want your girl to have her arms straight all the time? Do you want to create elbows by stitching across at that elbow length? Or do you want her to have a bend in her arm? Now, I would say let's just do straight arms for right now, and then we can maneuver them with stitching later, because stitching them will be a demon if you try to put a permanent bend in it. It's not impossible, and I've seen dolls where their arms are bent, like they come down at the elbow and then they're already bent. But think about doing that at the sewing machine. That might not be what you want to do. So I'm just going to come down. And your arm gets smaller as you go to the bottom. I'm just going to curl this around like this. That's her finger area. And then maybe up here, come out a little bit and make a little thumb. Okay, so that's what my dolly's arm's going to be. And I'm going to go and I'm going to add the 1/4 inch the rest of the way around. And see, when you make her and you've sewn and you've got this, you can decide where her elbow is going to be. And you can put like a line of stitching across in the opposite direction. Like these arms are going to attach sideways like this on the side. So if you flatten her arm out so the seam is running down the top of the arm, and see how it flattens out right here at your elbow? That's you'll just put a line of stitches there and it'll make her have elbows. Does that make sense? I hope so. I hope I'm giving you good enough instructions, because we're about done with this video for today. And next week, I want you to show up with your doll cut out and ready to sew, and we'll sew and stuff her next week. This will give you guys time to go find your fabric. Please don't go out and purposely buy fabric for something like this. Use what you have. If you've got just an old pillowcase that's getting kind of ratty, doesn't matter what color, you could always come in with fabric paint later and paint her a face on. You could stitch her a face on. This is all about using what you have to create a rag doll. She's a rag doll. She's going to be made out of things that you would have on hand, just like they did in the Depression. People didn't go out and buy dolls. And it's important to keep these skills alive. It really is. Carol and I have talked about this in conversation of how important it is to keep these old skills going. That's why I think YouTube is an awesome way to teach things like this. The thumb may be a little bit of a weird looking thing as you're doing. If you don't want to add a thumb, you just want her hands to be straight, that's entirely up to you. I have seen dolls that were made way, way back where they just went like that. They didn't have a thumb. They just went like that. So if you don't want to add a little thumb, I just thought it'd be cute to have a little thumb. Again, your doll, you decide what she has, okay? And anywhere there's a curve, we will be snipping to the seams to give them the ability to maneuver easier. Release that tension on the seam. It's very important that you clip your curves and seams. Oh, another thing I forgot to do that you might want to add is just some guidelines. Hang on just a sec. Like we did on the head, you might want to add that to these other components just so you're making sure you're matching up correctly. So like if you want to make sure this arm is matched up, you might on the back side, you might want to cut out a little, one of those little things like you see on sewing patterns, just to make sure you're getting it lined up. I didn't really do that here on this leg. I can just put a mark here to remind myself to make a little clip or something so that I can match them all up correctly. This would naturally come out. So we're going to need to cut. These are the arms, and you need to cut 4. So the most important thing is you need 2 heads, 2 bodies, and then 4 arms, 4 legs. Okay? Do you guys want me to cut the pieces out with you? real quick. I can do that before we leave. And then next week, you just bring what we did here. When you're adding things like the thumbs and things like that, the most important thing when you're stitching, just to slow down in those areas and just go slow and steady and just go around the curves. And again, I'm just using muslin. Okay, I'm so glad she's doing better. I'm glad she's resting. I know the sleep is the most important thing with that stuff. All right, so here's our fabric. I'm going to cut this out. I normally would press this, but it's a rag doll. I'm not real worried about it. This is some muslin I had in the back that I just found. Okay, so it's already folded in half. It's not really folded the right way, and it's kind of thin, but she's just a dolly. Now for the arms and legs, I'm just going to fold this one more time. I think I've got enough space here. And when I'm sewing clothes, I really do focus on the grain of the fabric, because if you maneuver a fabric, a pattern so much just to get it to fit on, you can mess yourself up really bad when it comes to that direction of the grain, because if you get the grain offline of how it's marked on, like, say, pants, what will happen as you're walking, it'll twist around your leg. So yeah. All right, so I have got basically 4 layers of fabric here, and I'm going to cut my arms and legs out. We need some pins and a really nice pair of scissors. Never use your fabric scissors on paper. And I'm going to try to eyeball this. I'm actually against the grain because this is not folded selvage to selvage. But again, it's a dolly. So I'm just going to pin her through her foot. And then what we'll end up with is what you have to bring next week. Okay. And I will get myself set up for next Wednesday to film with a sewing machine at hand. So we'll do the sewing next week. All right, and then I'll get the arm on here. And this is folded, so there's 4 layers here. So I can just move this up and I can pin the head and the body on here. And also keep in mind of what you want to make her hair out of. Like I said, I'm going to use my Serger's offcuts, and it's got cotton fabric, it's got some knit fabric, it's got some fleece in there. She's going to have some very colorful hair. All right. I might come down closer to this end so I'm not wasting quite so much fabric. And let's see here. Stick her body on here. And now I'm only cutting through 2 layers of fabric. Or pinning it to 2 layers of fabric because I only need 2 bodies. This is really thin muslin. I must have got it when it was one of those mega bundles, buy a bolt at Joann's when I worked there. But that stuff is really, it's only good for making muslins or, you know, some kind of inexpensive craft type thing, because it's not a nice heavyweight muslin at all. And her arms will get attached up here. I didn't put any little X's, but that's where her arms will get attached. And as I said, I'm just going to attach all of that with buttons. I think I've got some doll needles somewhere where I could sew all the way through her body, but I don't know where they are. Maybe I can find them before next week. All right, then I'm going to put her head on over here. All right. I'm interested to see that book that Dee Dee got me. Oh, you're welcome, Janet Nash. You're always welcome here. Absolutely, Carol. That was my objective, is to get everybody to draw their own doll pattern and give it your whatever personality you want her to have. It's catching in my paper underneath, and I don't want to cut my paper, and I don't want to cut paper with these scissors. These are my favorite scissors. There we go. All right. So now we'll cut her out and see what she looks like. What are some other things that you could make hair with? We'll have an unclothed doll that our first thing we're going to add is her hair and whatever kind of face you want her to have. I just got to looking at that surging offcuts, and I was like, that would make some totally awesome hair. Yeah, don't cut the paper pattern or anything paper with your good scissors when you're cutting things out. Oh, and I'll need to load some either white or cream thread on my sewing machine. All right, so there's my heads. I guess I should talk about where to leave the openings and mark those on your pattern so you know where to sew to next week. We'll do that real quick. If you want your doll to be pear-shaped, make her pear-shaped, you know. You could very much make this into art dolls, just by what you make her body out of, what you make her body out of. Will you apply paint later, or will you apply stitching later? Whatever you apply to her body, it's going to give her all the character, or how you put her face on. This is driving me crazy. It's because this muslin's not very thick. It's wanting to shift on me. These are all the kind of things you can think about. Do you want to make her a tutu? Do you have tulle laying around? Or do you want to give her a ribbon skirt and just make her make her an elastic band waistline, and then just tie ribbon on it, and you can make her a ribbon tutu. There are so many different ways you can. There's absolutely tons of options. And if you've got a little gal in your life, man, kids, they're fearless, man. They can come up with ideas you'd never think of ever. I know this looks so wasteful. I'll throw all this cotton into my cotton bin. I want to get a clothes hamper that's for just cotton offcuts that I can pull to make scrap quilts or use as stuffing, that kind of thing. So only the worst pieces make it to the trash can. All right, and see, this cuts right through the 4 layers with no problem. These are gingers. I know Deb Farrell's got some that she likes. I can't remember the brand of the scissors, but she said she bought them off, I think, one of those Facebook ads. They start with a G too, but I can't remember what it is. Oops. Wherever you leave your opening to turn the doll components right side out and to stuff her needs to be somewhere that is easy for you to stitch closed and it won't show, like when the doll's on display. So I would say leave an opening maybe at the back of the leg and the back of the arm. And then the neck opening on the head and the bottom. So if you look at your pattern, I'm going to just take a break real quick. I'm going to take this pen and I'm just going to put a little mark like right here to like right here. And that's where you leave it open. So you're going to put 2 layers of this together, stitch a 1/4 inch away all the way around except for between this opening, and that'll give you somewhere to turn this. Now remember, these are doll components, so you need to take your time when you're turning it. It's going to be fiddly. And of course, you're just going to leave this open down here. So you sew up and around the head. And then on this piece, you want this sewed really well with a sewing machine, so your opening will be down here at the bottom. And then on the arm, do it on the back of her arm. Leave an opening like back here. Okay? And that's what you have to bring next week, is these components. And we'll sew her together next week. Yeah, they're talking about it's the whole United States is dealing with this smoke. We're dealing with it even here in South Carolina. And some people say they don't believe that, but it's in our news all the time. Air quality sucks because of the smoke. It's drifting. There's a lot going on up there. With our neighbors to the north. I think Carol's real nearby it, which is not good. Yep. I really miss the mountain breeze to blow a lot of stuff away. We don't get that here. Scott describes the Columbia, South Carolina area as where the giants sat to build the mountains. So I hope you guys will enjoy this project. I'm thinking this might take us at least 3 episodes because next week we'll get together and sew the dollies together, and then and we'll get her stuffed between 2 and 3, and then we'll get together and try to draw some clothes patterns. Whoops. All right, I've got mine all cut out. So next week we will actually sew her together. So 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 heads, 2 bodies. Okay? I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Wednesday at noon, and we'll bring our dolls to life. Okay? Have a great time, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.